The music was still playing, the laughter of young women filling the air, when I realized something was wrong. I turned to look in the mirror, and there it was, right on my back. Freeloader. At my daughter-in-law's bridal shower, of all places. My name's Grace, and I've spent my life giving everything for my family, but that sticker, that was the moment I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you let it slide or stand up for yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about what it means to fight for respect in your own family. I arrived at Abigail's bridal shower feeling like a stranger in a room full of strangers. The event was held at Sandra's house, which looked like something out of a magazine. Gleaming chandeliers, white marble floors, and tables lined with silver platters of delicate finger sandwiches and pastries. The women gathered around me were dressed in their Sunday best, their laughter loud and carefree. And then there was me in my blue dress, the one I'd saved up for 3 months to buy, feeling utterly out of place. Everyone around me was chatting about the latest vacations, shopping sprees, and social connections, as though they had lives so far removed from my own. Their conversations floated above my head as I stood by the punch bowl, trying not to look too awkward. Abigail, my future daughter-in-law, was perched on a white armchair like it was a throne, receiving a constant stream of attention from everyone, her eyes barely glancing at me. "Grace, come join us for the gift opening," Sandra called, her voice carrying that tone she always used with older relatives, too loud, too sweet, almost condescending. I hesitated for a moment, then made my way over to where the other women had gathered around Abigail. They all smiled at me, but the smiles didn't reach their eyes. I took my place in the circle, feeling invisible in the midst of all their polished perfection. Sandra handed Abigail the small box I had wrapped the night before. "This one's from Thomas's mom," she announced with a grin, and my heart sank. I tried not to think about the fact that I was, once again, a small part of the picture, like an accessory or afterthought. Abigail tore through the wrapping paper, opening the jewelry box to reveal the pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. I had promised myself I would save them for my daughter one day, but now they were just part of the chaos of Abigail's bridal shower. "Oh," Abigail said, her smile tight, her eyes flickering with disinterest. "How traditional." The women around her chuckled politely. I felt a sting deep in my chest. I was proud to offer them to her, but the way she dismissed them was like a slap in the face. I barely heard Sandra announce the next gift as my thoughts swirled. I was invisible here, in this world of wealth and privilege. I had made a choice to be part of Thomas's life, to support him through thick and thin, to give everything for him. And now, here I was, holding on to the pieces of a past that seemed so far removed from Abigail's reality. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment to breathe. The air felt thick as I stood in front of the mirror, trying to make sense of the tightness in my chest. I stared at my reflection, wondering when I had become so invisible. Then, I felt something unusual on the back of my dress. It was a sticker, stuck there without my noticing. I twisted around to read it, my heart racing as I saw the bold letters, "Freeloader." My stomach dropped. I stood frozen, staring at the sticker, unable to process what was happening. Before I could even think of what to do, the door to the restroom opened. "Oh my God, I can't believe she's still here." Abigail's voice drifted in, and my heart pounded. I quickly turned away from the mirror, hoping they hadn't noticed me. "She's been nothing but trouble," Thomas's mom. "Always asking for money, always putting them in awkward situations," Sandra continued. My hands shook as I stood there, listening to the two of them talk, oblivious to the fact that I could hear every word. I wanted to say something, to confront them, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? What could I do? I was no longer the mother who had given everything for her son. Now, I was just a burden. "Thomas says she's always asking for money," Abigail sighed. "It's ridiculous. I just told him we'll need to set boundaries once we're married. I'm not going to be dragged down by her." I froze. My mind flashed back to the day Thomas had come to me, heartbroken, asking for help. The wedding at the Rosewood Hotel was more than he could afford, but he couldn't bear the thought of disappointing Abigail. So I gave him everything I had, sold my house, handed over the $175,000 check. It was my life savings, my security, my future, but I didn't care. I would do anything for Thomas. I shut off the water in the sink, my hands trembling. Tears threatened to spill as I realized what had just happened. The woman my son loved, the woman who had taken everything from me, was now calling me a freeloader. As I wiped my face, I steeled myself. I wasn't going to let them see me break. I would fix this, somehow. With a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and peeled the sticker from my back, not looking at it. I didn't say anything to Abigail or Sandra as I walked past them to grab my purse. They fell silent as I passed, and I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't acknowledge them. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me falter. The drive home felt like a blur. When I pulled into my parking space, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "How's the shower going? Is Abby happy?" he asked. I stared at his message, the tears finally falling. How could I tell him the truth? How could I explain that I had sacrificed everything for him, only to be reduced to this? An invisible woman, ignored and disrespected by the very people I had helped create the life for. As I sat in my car, the weight of everything I had done and everything I had lost finally sank in. I thought about the woman in the mirror, the one who had given everything but had been left behind, and I wondered, as I always had, was I invisible to my own family? I stepped out of the bathroom, trying to regain my composure, but as soon as I walked back into the living room, their eyes found me. Abigail and Sandra didn't say a word, but I could feel the weight of their gazes, sharp and judgmental. They both wore smiles too perfect to be real, and yet I could see the slight flicker of discomfort in their eyes when they looked at me. It was as if they were pretending not to know what I had just overheard. I walked past them, my heart pounding in my chest. The sticker, still clutched tightly in my hand, felt like a burning reminder of everything I had become in their eyes. A freeloader. The term echoed in my mind like a drumbeat. I didn't know how much longer I could pretend that I was still part of this family, that I could sit quietly and allow them to walk all over me. But that was exactly what I'd been doing. Sitting quietly, observing as Abigail and Sandra made all the decisions, leaving me to watch from the sidelines. They'd made me feel small, insignificant, like a stranger in my own son's life. It didn't take long before I realized how little I was included in the planning of the wedding. Every meeting, every decision, it seemed, was made without me. I had tried to contribute in my own way. I offered to help pick out the decorations, to give my thoughts on the menu, but it was always, "Oh, it's already taken care of," or "We've already got it covered." At one point, I even suggested a couple of ideas for the wedding cake, but Abigail's mother, who was taking the reins of the wedding planning, barely glanced at me before moving on to someone else. I had thought that maybe, just maybe, Thomas would step in and say something, but he hadn't. He had become distant, preoccupied with Abigail's family and all the arrangements. It was as if I had become a footnote in the story of his life, only there when he needed something. When the wedding was coming together, he would text me occasionally asking how I was doing, but I could hear the emptiness in his voice. I sat at home watching Abigail post every detail of the wedding on her social media. Every new update was like a slap in the face, a reminder that I was excluded, that I was not part of her world. She would post photos of the venue, of her friends helping with the preparations, of the flowers and the cake tasting, and I wasn't there. I was never there. And then there was the cake tasting, the one event I had hoped to attend. I had expected it to be a family event, something we could all enjoy together, but instead, Abigail had invited her mother's friends, the same people who had been taking over everything. I wasn't even invited to be a part of it. When I asked Thomas about it, he hesitated. "I'm sorry, Mom, but it's just easier this way," he said. "Abby's family knows all these vendors. They're just better equipped to handle it." I smiled, though it hurt. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, my voice catching in my throat. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the wedding. It was about something much deeper. I wasn't just excluded from the wedding planning, I was being excluded from their lives. As the days went by, the tension between me and Abigail grew. Every time I tried to speak up, to voice my concerns or offer my help, I was dismissed. And Thomas, who had once been my partner in all things, had begun to avoid me too. The distance between us, once so unthinkable, now seemed like a chasm. I had tried to reach out, tried to understand why things had changed, but the more I tried, the more he pulled away. And then came the moment that I had been dreading. Thomas called me one afternoon, his voice strained, his words carefully chosen. "Mom, about the rehearsal dinner," he began, his tone hesitant. "Abby and I talked and, well, we think it might be better if you don't come. It's just, there's limited space and we don't want any tension before the wedding." My heart dropped. I had been expecting it, but hearing it from him, hearing him say it so casually, it felt like a betrayal. I couldn't even respond right away. What could I say? "I understand, Thomas," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt numb. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't just an outsider in their wedding. I was becoming an outsider in their lives. I was being pushed out bit by bit until I no longer had a place. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, not knowing what to do. I wasn't invited to the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't wanted at the wedding. What had I become? Was I so invisible, so unimportant, that they couldn't even give me a seat at the table? And then it hit me. I had been so focused on being the supportive mother, the one who did everything for her son, that I had forgotten about myself. I had spent so many years making sure Thomas had everything he needed, making sure he never felt the weight of our struggles, that I had lost sight of my own needs. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something inside me, a spark of defiance. I wasn't going to let this continue. I wasn't going to let them treat me like I didn't matter. Am I still a part of this family? The thought echoed in my mind, a painful truth that I didn't want to face. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep ignoring what was happening. I had to speak up. I had to stop pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. I didn't know how things would turn out. I didn't know what I was going to do next. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. I had given enough. Now it was time to fight for my place in this family. And so I made a decision. I wasn't going to the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't going to the wedding either. If they didn't want me there, then they would have to find a way to live without me. I wasn't supposed to overhear them. I wasn't supposed to be standing in the hallway, frozen, hearing Abigail and Sandra talk about me as if I weren't even there. But there I was, just outside the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest as their voices carried through the thin walls of the house. "I can't believe she sold her house for this wedding," Sandra's voice echoed, sharp and mocking. "Thomas doesn't even know how much she's been giving. She's been living off nothing just to make sure he has everything he wants." "Ugh, don't remind me," Abigail responded, her voice laced with disdain. "She's a walking charity case. I mean, what does she even think she's doing? Throwing away everything just to keep up with me and my family? It's embarrassing." I felt the floor beneath me shift, as though the earth had cracked open. I pressed myself against the wall, my chest tightening with every word they said. My breath hitched, and I didn't know whether to scream or run. I wanted to burst through the door, confront them both, and shout every truth I'd kept hidden. But I stayed silent. Every word they spoke was like a punch in the gut, and yet I couldn't tear myself away. I sold my house. The house where I had raised Thomas, the house filled with memories of his father, my husband who had passed away too soon. I gave up everything for him, for this wedding, for the man I raised to be better than this. And now, here they were, discussing my sacrifices like they were nothing more than an inconvenience. How could Abigail, the woman who had cost me everything, stand there and call me a walking charity case? I had given everything, and she had the nerve to call me a burden. I backed away from the door, my hands trembling. How long had they been talking about me like this? How long had they been mocking my sacrifice, making me feel like I was less than them? The realization hit me hard. All the quiet pain, all the nights I spent wondering if Thomas saw me as invisible. It was all true. I was invisible to him. And now, Abigail had made sure of it. I walked back to my room, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The weight of it all settled on me. I had given up my home, my financial security, and the things I thought would keep me going. I had sold my mother's jewelry to fund their wedding, sacrificed everything just so that Thomas could have the perfect life, the perfect wedding. And this was how they repaid me. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at the woman staring back at me. She was a stranger, a woman who had given too much and received nothing but contempt in return. My mind raced. I had been so focused on giving Thomas everything he needed that I had lost sight of my own value. I had spent so many years being the silent provider, the mother who did everything for her son, that I had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. But that was going to change. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I couldn't keep allowing them to walk all over me. I had given up everything for Thomas. Now, it was time to make him see what I had done. It was time for him to understand the depth of my sacrifice. I needed to face him. I needed to tell him the truth. When Thomas came over that afternoon, I could feel the tension in the air before he even said a word. He looked tired, distant, as if he had been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. But when he saw me, he smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. I could see it in the way he looked at me, distant as if I were a stranger. "Hey, Mom," he said, walking toward me and sitting down at the kitchen table. "How's everything?" "Everything's fine," I said, though I knew it wasn't. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was it. This was the moment. "We need to talk, Thomas." He looked up at me, frowning. "What's going on, Mom?" "Do you have any idea what I've done for you? For this wedding?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt a lump form in my throat as I struggled to get the words out. "I sold our house, Thomas, the house you grew up in. I sold it so that you could have the wedding of your dreams. I sold it so that you wouldn't have to worry about money." Thomas's face fell, his eyes widening in disbelief. "What? You sold the house? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't want you to feel guilty," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't want you to know how much I had to give up. But now, it seems like it doesn't even matter. I've been giving, and it's never enough. You're so focused on Abigail and her family that you can't even see what I've done for you, what I've sacrificed." Thomas stood up, shaking his head. "No, Mom, that's not true. You didn't know because I kept it hidden," I interrupted. "You didn't know because you were too busy making sure everything was perfect for Abigail. But I've been here all along, giving everything I had to make sure you never felt the weight of our struggles." Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at him. He was still standing, his hands at his sides, frozen. He didn't know what to say, and honestly, I didn't know if I could keep going. "I did it for you, Thomas, but now I'm just invisible. I'm nothing but a burden to you and her." "I didn't mean to make you feel like that," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "But I don't know how to fix this. I can't believe you did that for me." I felt my chest tighten, the pain of all my sacrifices flooding over me. "You need to understand what I've done for you. You need to understand the sacrifices I've made. I can't keep living like this, pretending that everything is okay when it's not. Thomas took a step back, his eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "I don't understand, Mom. I don't know what to say." "Maybe you never will," I whispered. "But I can't keep pretending. I've given up everything for you, and I'm not invisible anymore. I won't be." As I looked at him, I saw the conflict in his eyes, the guilt, the confusion, the realization that everything he thought he knew about me was about to change. And just as I was about to say something more, he turned, his voice breaking. "How many more secrets are there, Mom? How much more have you been hiding from me?" The words stung like a slap across my face. I had spent so many years keeping secrets, protecting him, making sure he never felt the weight of our struggles. But now, I was starting to wonder if I had done more harm than good. Will he ever understand? The question echoed in my mind, but I couldn't answer it. I had given everything, but would it ever be enough? The wedding day arrived with an air of inevitability. It was beautiful, almost too perfect. But beneath the grandeur, I could feel the tension building in my chest. It was a day that should have been filled with joy, but it had become a battleground for my heart. I had already made the decision. I wasn't going to hide anymore. Not today. Not in front of all these people who saw me as nothing more than an invisible bystander. As I slipped into my dress, the soft fabric brushing against my skin, I felt the weight of the moment press down on me. The house was buzzing with activity, the smell of flowers, the chatter of guests arriving, and the distant hum of music that seemed to signal the beginning of a new chapter. A new life for Thomas and Abigail. But what about me? What about the years of sacrifice I had given? Today, I would make sure everyone knew. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I looked in the mirror. The reflection staring back at me was the same, but something inside had shifted. I wasn't going to be silenced anymore. I wasn't going to be made invisible. I had given so much of myself, and for too long it had been unrecognized. Not anymore. I joined the rest of the guests in the grand ballroom, which had been transformed into something straight out of a dream. The chandeliers hung like shimmering stars above us, casting their glow over the sea of elegantly dressed people. The tables were adorned with white roses and crystal glasses, and the air smelled of expensive perfume mixed with the sweetness of the wedding cake. Abigail, in her flawless wedding gown, stood at the center of it all, as if she had become the sun around which everything revolved. I took my seat, far from the head table, as I had anticipated. I wasn't family in their eyes. Not really. I was just a guest, someone who had been tolerated. My eyes scanned the room, landing on Thomas, who was laughing with his friends, but his gaze never met mine. He didn't even look my way. It stung more than I wanted to admit. Abigail's mother, Sandra, was standing nearby, engaged in a conversation with some of her friends. She shot me a quick glance, the smile on her face tight, as if she was trying to hide something beneath her cool exterior. I caught her eye, and for a brief moment we exchanged a look that spoke volumes. I had no illusions about where I stood in this family. I was an outsider. I had always been one, but today I was going to change that. The dinner began, and as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling of being invisible. Abigail made sure to draw all the attention to herself, as if this wedding were her one chance to prove something to the world. I couldn't blame her for wanting the best, but what about me? What had I ever wanted? As the speeches started, I felt a shift in the air. People were beginning to look at me, waiting for me to speak. For a moment, I felt a flash of doubt. Was I doing the right thing? But then I remembered the sticker. The freeloader label that had been stuck to my back at Abigail's bridal shower. The words echoed in my mind, reminding me of how I had been humiliated. I had let it go then, but not anymore. I stood up, my hands trembling slightly as I placed my napkin down on the table. The room fell silent as I cleared my throat, catching the attention of everyone around me. The music faded into the background and the guests turned toward me. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't waver. This was it. This was my moment. "Excuse me," I began, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "I just need to say a few words." The room was silent, expectant. Abigail looked over at me, her eyes widening in surprise, and I saw Sandra exchange a quick glance with her, as if they both knew what was coming. I wasn't sure if I was prepared for the way this was going to play out, but I had no choice. The truth had to come out. "I'm Grace Thomas's mother," I continued, my voice louder now, with more conviction. "And for those of you who don't know me, I've been here, giving everything I could for my son. This wedding," I paused, feeling the weight of every word. "This wedding that you see today, every beautiful detail, every extravagant thing you have here, I made it possible. I sold my house, my home, the place where I raised my son. I sold it to help make this day happen, and I did it because I love my son more than anything." The room was quiet, and I could feel the eyes of the guests on me, some surprised, some uncomfortable. But I wasn't stopping now. I gave up everything for him. And yet, I have been made to feel like I don't belong here, like I'm invisible. Abigail's face reddened, her jaw tightening as she stood across the room, glaring at me. Sandra's eyes narrowed, but I didn't care anymore. "No one has the right to make you invisible," I said, my voice growing stronger. "Not your family, not anyone. I've spent my whole life making sure Thomas never went without. But what about me? What about the sacrifices I've made? Today I'm here to remind you all that I'm not invisible. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, the room was still. No one spoke. The silence hung thick in the air. Thomas was standing at the other end of the room, his eyes wide in disbelief. His hands were clenched at his sides, and I could see the mix of guilt and confusion on his face. Abigail, on the other hand, stood frozen, her face a deep shade of red. The tension was palpable. Then in a flash, Thomas turned and left the room, his arm linked with Abigail's. They walked out together, leaving me standing there, exposed and raw in front of everyone. The whispers began almost immediately, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding in my chest, but there was a sense of release, too. I had finally said what needed to be said. As I stood there, I couldn't help but wonder, will this change everything? I watched as Thomas and Abigail left the reception, their backs to me as they disappeared into the night. And though I stood there surrounded by guests who were now too uncomfortable to approach me, I felt a strange sense of resolve. The battle had just begun. The phone call came late in the evening, just after the wedding had ended, the kind of late where the world feels too quiet, too still. I sat in my small apartment, the silence surrounding me like a heavy blanket. When my phone buzzed, it was Thomas. I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of what I was about to hear. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure if I was ready for another round of disappointment, but I answered anyway. "Mom?" His voice cracked and my heart sank. I had never heard him sound so small. "I need to talk to you. I know I've messed up. I don't know how I didn't see it before. Everything you've done for me, I was blind." The words hung in the air between us, thick with emotion. My throat tightened, and I couldn't tell if it was the relief of hearing him acknowledge his mistakes or the years of silence and hurt that had led to this moment. "I should have seen it," he continued. "You've sacrificed everything for me. You sold your house, gave up everything for my wedding, and I never even thought to ask why. I never saw it until now, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom." I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I pushed it down. This was the moment I had been waiting for, not because I wanted him to feel guilty, but because I needed him to understand. "It's not about the money, Thomas," I said quietly, trying to steady my voice. "It was never about the money. It was about making sure you had everything you needed. It was about giving you the chances I never had." He was silent for a moment. Then I heard him sigh, the sound heavy with regret. I've been a fool. I've let her, Abigail, dictate so much of my life. I didn't see how I was treating you. I didn't see how she was treating you. The mention of Abigail's name caused a slight tension in my chest. Despite everything, I knew I still had to be cautious. There was a lot unsaid between us, and I wasn't sure where his loyalty truly lay. But hearing him acknowledge her behavior for the first time gave me a faint hope. "She doesn't understand," he said, his voice shaky. "She doesn't know what it means to sacrifice everything. She thinks it's all about appearances, and I've let her make decisions for me without considering you or what you've done for me. I want to fix this, Mom. I want to make things right." I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me. This was the first real acknowledgement of the distance that had grown between us, and for a moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. "You can fix this," I said, my voice steady, "but you need to make her understand. You need to make her see that there's more to family than the surface. She needs to understand what real love looks like, and that it's not about money or status. It's about respect." "I will, Mom. I promise you. I'll talk to her. I'll make her see." I didn't know if he truly meant it or if it was just another moment of guilt, but I was willing to let him try. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of change. But even as I spoke to him, I knew that it wasn't going to be easy. Abigail's influence on Thomas had been too strong, and the cracks in their relationship were still too new to repair so quickly. The anger I felt toward her hadn't faded, and I wasn't sure how I would ever truly forgive her for the way she had treated me, how she had made me feel invisible, unworthy. Over the next few days, Thomas tried to reach out to me more. He called often, even stopped by my apartment a couple of times. Each time, I could see how much he was struggling with his relationship with Abigail. It was clear that their marriage wasn't as perfect as it appeared from the outside. He was caught between wanting to honor me, his mother, and keeping the peace with her. The constant tug of war left him emotionally drained, but at least he was talking to me now. At least he was acknowledging the pain I had been carrying for so long. But the conversation I had with him, while a step in the right direction, wasn't without its complications. The issues that lay between us weren't just about what Abigail had done or what he had failed to notice. They were about how he had allowed me to be marginalized in the first place. There were so many layers to unpack, so much unresolved tension. And every time I saw him, it became more apparent that the truth hadn't been fully revealed yet. Thomas came over one evening, sitting across from me at the small dining table in my apartment. He looked tired, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "I told her, Mom," he said, his voice quiet. "I told Abigail everything. I told her about the house, about what you did for me. But she wasn't happy. She said it wasn't fair to her." I didn't know what to say. Hearing that Abigail had reacted that way wasn't a surprise, but it still stung. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, Mom. I want to make things work, but I don't know how to make her understand. She doesn't get it. She thinks I should just forget about all of this and move on, but I can't. Not anymore. I won't." The words hung in the air, filled with the weight of unspoken feelings, but they were honest words, and I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. The realization that Thomas was beginning to see the truth, that he was beginning to recognize the sacrifices I had made, was something I had been waiting for. I just didn't know if it would be enough. As he stood to leave, he hugged me tightly, his arms wrapping around me as though he didn't want to let go. "I'll keep fighting for this, Mom," he whispered. "I promise." I watched him go, my heart aching as he walked out of the door. I wanted to believe him. I truly did. But there was a lingering doubt in my mind. Could he ever really make her understand? Could he ever truly stand up to Abigail and see through the mask she wore? The night stretched on, the weight of the questions lingering in my mind. What comes next? Would everything change for the better? Or was I just setting myself up for more disappointment? I didn't have the answers. But I knew one thing for sure. The road ahead was going to be harder than I had ever imagined. The Thanksgiving invitation came unexpectedly. The message from Abigail was short, almost curt. "We'd love for you to join us for Thanksgiving this year, Grace." It's been a while. I stared at the text, the words simple but laden with meaning. For months I had been treated like an outsider, quietly enduring the slow erosion of my relationship with Thomas, my son, the one person I thought I could always count on. Abigail had been a silent yet powerful force in that erosion, but now here she was, offering a gesture of peace, a sign that maybe, just maybe, things were finally changing. I sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of the moment press down on me. The past year had been a whirlwind of tension, broken conversations, and unsaid words. I had endured my own humiliation, fought for my dignity, and then had to watch my son struggle between the woman he had married and the mother who had given him everything. It had felt like I was losing him in slow motion. But now, with Abigail's invitation, there was a chance, a small one, that we could rebuild, or at the very least, that I could begin to find peace. When the day arrived, I dressed carefully but simply in a soft sweater and slacks. I didn't want to overdo it. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, just to be present. The drive to Abigail's house was quiet, and as I approached their neighborhood, I could already see the glow of holiday lights from their large home. It was everything Abigail wanted, a perfect, polished family gathering, the kind of celebration that always felt just beyond my reach. But now, maybe, it was mine to experience. As I walked up to the door, my heart beat a little faster. Would things be different this time? Could the wounds of the past year truly begin to heal? Abigail greeted me at the door, her expression polite, but her eyes seemed softer than I remembered. She was still the same woman, refined, beautiful, and composed, but there was a flicker of something else there, something that wasn't quite as cold as before. "I'm glad you could come," she said, stepping aside to let me in. I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. The house was bustling with people, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. The scent of turkey and stuffing made my stomach growl, though I wasn't sure if it was hunger or nerves that made me feel unsettled. We sat down to dinner, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was being quietly ignored. Abigail made sure I was included in the conversations, asking about my life, my new apartment, even about my retirement plans. It was as though she was trying to find common ground, trying to bridge the gap between us. But I could tell she wasn't fully comfortable yet, still unsure of how to navigate this new dynamic between us. Thomas was quieter than usual, but there was an openness to him that I hadn't seen in a long time. He kept glancing at me, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite name. Guilt, perhaps, or maybe just the weight of all the unspoken things we hadn't yet resolved. But he didn't shy away from me as he had before. Instead, he engaged in conversation, making an effort to bring me into discussions, including me in the life he had built with Abigail. As dinner progressed, I found myself in a conversation with Abigail, of all people. We were talking about the wedding, the details I had never fully known about. She asked if I had any advice, and for the first time, it felt like she was genuinely seeking my opinion. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, even as she spoke with the same controlled politeness she always had. "Grace, I know I didn't always make things easy between us, but I want you to know that I see what you've done for Thomas. I understand more than I did before." I paused, unsure of how to respond. "It's been hard for me," I said quietly. "I've been trying to be there for him, but I didn't always know how." Abigail nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I've seen that. I've seen how much you care. And I'm sorry for the way things went last year. It wasn't fair to you." The apology wasn't grand, but it was enough. It was the first step towards something better, something more genuine. For the first time in a long time, I felt as though I wasn't just a burden, an afterthought in their lives. There was space for me now. Maybe not a perfect space, but it was a space nonetheless. Thomas stood up from the table and cleared his throat. "I think it's time for a toast," he said, raising his glass. The room quieted, and all eyes turned to him. "I want to raise a glass to my mom, Grace. Without her, none of this would have been possible. She's given so much for me, more than I can ever repay. She's sacrificed so much. Mom, I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm proud of you." His words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. I could see the tears welling in his eyes, his voice cracking with the weight of everything unsaid. The room was silent for a moment, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for me to respond. I took a deep breath, feeling the lump in my throat. "Thank you, Thomas," I said softly. "It's all I've ever wanted, to see you happy. I've always wanted what's best for you, and if that meant making sacrifices, then I did it without hesitation." Abigail, standing nearby, looked over at me with a soft expression. There was still so much unsaid between us, but in this moment we both knew we had taken the first steps towards something new. The room erupted in cheers, glasses clinking together in a symphony of gratitude and perhaps a little bit of hope. As dinner continued, I felt something shift within me. The tension that had lingered in the past few months was beginning to ease, replaced with a fragile sense of understanding. I wasn't completely healed, but I could finally see the cracks that had formed in the walls that had kept us all apart. There was room for us to rebuild, piece by piece. Later, after the meal was over and the guests had filtered out, I found myself standing in the quiet of the living room, gazing out the window at the snow beginning to fall. The world outside was still, peaceful, the kind of peace I hadn't known in a long time. I wasn't sure what the future held for me, for Thomas, or for Abigail, but for the first time, I felt like I had a place in that future. I had fought for it, endured the silence and the hurt, and now there was a chance for all of us to move forward. As I stood there, I asked myself one question, a question that had haunted me throughout this journey. Can love survive the test of time and sacrifice? I didn't have the answer, but I knew one thing. I was willing to find out. As laughter filled our family table, I felt truly seen after standing up for myself. No one has the right to make you invisible. Speaking your truth can rebuild bonds, even if some cracks remain, and every step toward honesty is a victory. It's not always easy, but the journey toward self-respect and mutual understanding is worth it. If you've felt overlooked by family, share your story. Let's remind each other we matter.